Morning, all. All right, so the NHL passes into the 1930s. The 1929-1930 season also sees the Montreal Maroons rise up to the top of the Canadian division. They finished with a record of 23, 16, and 5, so 51 points to finish first. Also with 51 points, the Montreal Canadiens, 21, 14, and 9 record for them, so two less wins than the Maroons. The Ottawa Senators 21, 15, and 8. So there's 1 point separating the top three teams in the Canadian division. That's some parity for you. Toronto Maple Leafs 17, 21, and 6. 40 points for them. The New York Americans, after a really strong previous season, dropped back down to 14, 25, and 5 for 33 points at the bottom of the Canadian division. On the American side of things, the Boston Bruins have an amazing season. 38 5-1 record, 77 points, 26 points clear of second place in the entire league, and 30 points clear of second place in their division, even though it's only a 44-game season. Do the Bruins win the Cup? Apparently not. Chicago, 21 18 and 5 record, 47 points. So see, the President's Trophy curse predated the President's Trophy. But yeah, Chicago 21 18 and 5, 47 points for them. The New York Rangers 17 17 and 10 for 44 points. The Detroit Cougars at this point still 14 24 and 6, 34 points. They're about to become the Falcons though. Pittsburgh 5 36 and 3, 13 points. So yeah, Pittsburgh's had a really rough year. 5 36 and 3, the worst record I believe I've had on the board to this point. Probably one of the worst records in NHL history to that point, I would think. And yeah, so one thing that helped that year was players were able to actually play offensively. So they allow forward passing in all three zones. The thing is, there was no offside rule, meaning that in that time, that brief era, you could have had a Pavel Bure, Brett Hull just stand in front of the net. Just wait. I'll just wait here. Joe Pavelski could have been tipping pucks back then. But what they do is they realize that the cherry picking that's going on, where guys are just hanging out at the other team's net, you should probably discourage that, and so they bring in the offside rule. That's why the offside rule is brought in, and of course that really starts the game as we know it now. So the Stanley Cup final ends up being an upset, and it's a sweep as well. So the National Hockey League not entirely happy with how that works. They go from a best of 3 series to best of 5 going forward, and we know it'll become a best of 7 for similar reasons. So if you're wondering why are they best of 7 series, it's to try to make sure that the team that's the home ice favorite has a better chance to win, and you don't have as much of a chance to upset them. Again, a best of 3 series, yeah, it's a little bit different than that best of 5 or that best of 7. So December 3rd of 1929, the Boston Bruins start a record 14-game winning streak. They also won a record 22 at home, which spans this season as well as the following season. And yeah, some records being broken by Boston, though again in the Stanley Cup final, not so much. February 20th of 1930, Maroons Clint Benedict is the first to wear a mask during a game. He had a broken nose, so he needed a mask that game. It was only temporary. We wouldn't see masks come in permanently for about 30 more years. So yeah, I mean, they're all wearing cups, but protect the face? We'll see. March 25th of 1930, Maroons Archie Wilcox becomes the first defenseman to score a playoff overtime winner in a game against the Boston Bruins, which is right over here. So, yeah, and there's a lot of overtime in the playoffs this season as well. Busher Jackson, Charlie Conacher, and Joe Primo form the kid line in Toronto. Conn Smythe bringing the players in and then being thrown together on a line. And, of course, Toronto on the verge of getting better here, but they do miss the playoffs that season. Your number one scorer that year and setting records, Cooney Weiland. And you can see right away how the NHL has really encouraged offense. 43 goals, 30 assists, 73 points. That's in 44 games. So the 43 goals and 73 points are new NHL records. Frank Boucher's right behind him of the New York Rangers. 42 games, 26 goals, 36 assists, 62 points. The 36 assists by Boucher sets a new NHL record as well. Dick Clapper of the Boston Bruins, one of the all-time great names. 44 games, 41 goals, 20 assists for 61 points. Bill Cook for the New York Rangers, 44 games, 29 goals, 30 assists, 59 points. A lot more assists than what we were seeing, say, 5 or 6 seasons before. Heck Kilray for the Ottawa Senators, 44 games, 36 goals, 22 assists for 58 points. Nels Stewart for the Montreal Maroons, 44 games, 39 goals, 16 assists for 55 points. Howie Morenz, Montreal Canadiens, still in that top 10. 44 games, 40 goals, 13 assists, 53 points. And Normie Himes of the New York Americans. What a great hockey name. 44 games, 28 goals, 22 assists, 50 points. There's a lot of guys here you can throw in your NHL 24 game. If you're bored, you just go ahead and create a player and just put them all out there. Then in the goaltending numbers, nobody records more than 6 shutouts that season. Remember, last season, which we talked about yesterday, almost every goaltender was double digits in shutouts. So the NHL has greatly increased scoring. And again, if they hadn't brought in offsides, it would have been way more than that. Tiny Thompson, the best goalie in the league at that point for Boston. 38-5-1. He plays every single game and puts up a goals against of 2.19. Alex Connell for Ottawa, 21-15-8, 2.55 goals against. Charlie Gardner for Chicago, 21-18-5, 2.42 goals against average. George Hainsworth of Montreal, who had a 0.92 goals against the year before. 2013-9, 2.42 goals against as well. So he allows about goal and a half more per game. Yeah, goal and a half more per game. John Ross Roach for the Rangers, plays every game too. 17-17-10 record, 3.10 goals against. And Flat Walsh. What a great name. I love this era of hockey, I do. Flat Walsh for the Montreal Maroons, 17-11-4 record, 2.38 goals against average. So, way to go, Flat. And I had to look at his career. That's the most that he had ever for wins in his career. And not an overly long career, so I'm not going to do a video on Flat Walsh. But I may have to do a video on some of the great names from that era. I may just have to. The Hart Trophy goes to Nels Stewart for the Montreal Maroons. The Vezina Trophy goes to Tiny Thompson for Boston because lowest goals against average equals Vezina Trophy. The Lady Byng goes to Frank Boucher of the New York Rangers. So again, the most gentlemanly player, Frank Boucher. So we again have the same setup for the playoffs. The only best of 5 is the matchup between the 2 first place teams in their divisions, and that's in the semifinals. So they get a bye past the quarterfinals, but they still have a best of 5. So the quarterfinals, Montreal against Chicago. The Montreal Canadiens win the first game 1-0. They win the second game, or the second game goes to triple overtime. There's no winner. It's a 2-2 tie. I knew that was going to throw me off. So in terms of total goals, Montreal wins 3-2. The NHL really, the format at this point didn't make any sense. You have best, 2 games total goals here. Then it's best 2 out of 3, best 2 out of 3. But you have a best 3 out of 5 in the round before, best 2 out of 3. So in the other series, the New York Rangers tie Ottawa in the first game 1-1. And then the Rangers win the second game 5-2. The Rangers end up winning that series by a score of 6-3, I should say. Although they were 1-0-1 in those games too. So the semifinals, the Montreal Canadiens beat the Rangers in the first game in 4 overtimes by a score of 2-1. And then Montreal wins the second game in regulation 2-0. So the scoring really comes down in the playoffs because it's kind of an NHL staple. On the other side, and this is the battle between the two division winners, the Montreal Maroons lose against Boston in the first game 2-1 in triple overtime. Boston wins the second game 4-2. Then in Boston, Montreal wins in double overtime 1-0. But Boston wins the series over the Montreal Maroons with a 5-1 win to win the series 3-1 and move on to the Stanley Cup final where they meet the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal goes into Boston, wins the first game 3-0, so that's that. And then the second game in Montreal, the Habs win 4-3. So Montreal-Boston was a bad matchup for Boston. And we're going to be revisiting that theme over the coming decades. And so, Montreal wins the Stanley Cup. The Boston Bruins lost 2 games in a row once the entire season, and it's in the Stanley Cup final. So, again, it just shows that even before you have a President's Trophy, finishing first in the league, even by a lot, doesn't necessarily mean a lot come playoff time. The Montreal Canadiens sweeping aside Boston. But again, the NHL would look at that and say, well, we've got to make it a best out of 5 now. And eventually they make it a best out of 7. But there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.